Hello all, this is the Owl, and, welp, I guess we're finally getting around to it. As mentioned previously, April is going to be all about filling in those subscriber and patron requests, and this is probably my fifth most requested manga remaining, after Berserk and some other ones. So, what the hell, let's give it a look. Penned by the enigmatic and reclusive mangaka Sui Ishida, who, is one of the two mangaka that mentored the chap that made Chainsaw Man. No, it doesn't show at all. Tokyo Ghoul is one of those manga that, if you spend enough time in and around dark manga circles, will be utterly inescapable, and, depending on who you talk to, will either be the best thing or the worst thing since sliced bread or deep-fried cat poop respectively. Divisive is probably the right term, polarizing even. On one hand, Tokyo Ghoul is basically as responsible for the raising of the modern shonen bar as Demon Slayer. On the other hand, it hasn't aged perfectly. On one hand, it ran for a long-ass time, had an anime, and is still talked about today. On the other hand, it ran for probably a bit too long, and it shows. So, is it as good as it's cracked up to be? Is it as bad as it's cracked up to be? Is it complex and innovative, or is it overwritten wibbly-woo? Is it progressive and affirming of alternate identities, or is it regressive and stereotypical? Let's take a look. But first, as always, big spoilers ahead. If you have any interest in giving this manga a try, I would say, sure, at the end of the day, it's worth a look. And I would be curious as to your own opinions of it, so plonk them down in the comments. Otherwise, let's dive on in. Before we get into it, keep in mind that this is not a deep dive. Well, okay, I will be honest here. This video is partially a test run. I'm really curious to see if it gets a strike or not. I would love to cover Tokyo Ghoul in more depth at some point in the future, but it's rather notorious for attracting copyright strikes like an unattended hot dog at the beach attracts seagulls. So we'll see, I guess. Because, again, a lot of folks really want a deep dive on this, and yeah, I've got a lot to talk about. Tokyo Ghoul is, as with a ton of shonen, basically a two-parter. I call them split manga, but I'm sure there's a more technical term than this. You know what I mean. You've got the first, slightly under half of a story, then a big all is lost moment, a time skip, and then the second half. And Tokyo Ghoul goes the whole hog with this one, almost to the point where they feel like different series. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Our protagonist, Ken Kaneki, is, you know this guy already. Shonen protagonist type 3, the sensitive and shy loner who is also really good looking and impossibly good-hearted, socially clumsy and a bit of a nerd, but super intelligent and impossible to dislike once you get to know him. Girls all secretly adore him, but he's too introverted to notice. But you know what? This is the rare occasion where this kind of character actually works. As Ishida does take the character and the entire concept of this type of protagonist to interesting and, at times, almost subversive places. And for what it's worth, that's kind of cool. For a while at least. Again, we'll get there. He lives in, that sort of manga world. Again, you know the one because you've been here many times. Somewhere between an isekai and a young adult story, where the everyday world sits atop a secret world like a very small duck on top of a very big pond. After Kaneki gets attacked by a ghoul, the classic fairy tale and Dungeons & Dragons monster, here reimagined as a vicious flesh-eating pseudo-vampire capable of disguising itself as human, he ends up having her organs transplanted into his body to save his life. And he finds that this caused bad things to happen. Kaneki now has to deal with the fact that he's turning into a ghoul. And yes, there is a lot of Kafka in this sucker. Ishida is highly literate and takes every opportunity to show this off. So, quotes. Lots and lots of quotes. Anyway, ghouls. Strong, fast, hard to kill. Can only eat human flesh and coffee. No, I'm not kidding about the coffee. It's actually sort of a big plot point. Anything else makes them violently ill, with one exception. But, once again, we will get there. Ghouls have a sort of organic zanpakuto called a kagune, and the stronger the ghoul, the more batshit insane the kagune can get. They live all over Tokyo and are hunted by the government ghoul investigation squads, or doves, because, well, most of them kill people for meat, and many of them kill out of sadism or for pleasure or sport. They also fight amongst each other pretty often. And that brings us to the first major theme of the story, duality, as Kaneki falls in with the crew of Anteiku, a coffee shop in Tokyo run by a group of pacifist ghouls who basically want to coexist with humans and restrict themselves to meat from the already dead. Kind old Yoshimura, the owner of the shop, sees Kaneki as a potential ambassador between ghouls and humankind, and persuades him to stay with them for a while and learn about life as a ghoul, as someone who will either belong to neither world or potentially to both. And yeah, you can probably see why this caught on so fast with both teenage audiences in Japan and in the West. The premise and the execution make it a near-perfect manga for the, shall we say, hot topic era, as there's a ton of adolescent angst, feelings of disconnectedness, disillusionment and alienation, one's body no longer being your own, intense emotional and physical suffering in exchange for superpowers, and, of course, finding a new home in the secret real world underlying the mainstream one, where you have a set of abilities that make you unique. I'll take what is every young adult story of that decade for 500, Alex. But for what it's worth, it's done bloody well. The art, for one, is just, damn it, but this is a pretty manga, and it only gets better looking as it goes on. Panels can be a little cluttered, especially during fights, and every now and again it can be a bit visually confusing, but it's still gorgeous. There's a lot of that technique, which I think was mostly mainstreamed by Hiroya Oku, where you take a photograph of the real world or a real item and then you draw over it to create those jaw-dropping backgrounds, metallic textures and the like. It's a technique that I have always loved, and on top of this, Ishida captures movement and impact just bloody well. A lot of the way he draws stuff makes me wonder if he was either mentored in turn or just really enjoyed Kota Hirano's work. I also have to give him credit for his very creative paneling, which can get especially brilliant as the story goes on, and the complete horror freak-out moments are perfectly captured in a way that, reminds me of Tsukushi, and that is high praise. You don't see enough creative paneling in manga. The story moves along at a decent clip. Kaneki befriends the other workers at Anteiku, including the obvious love interest, a beautiful but troubled ghoul girl Toka, and tries to find his place but struggles, as he is forced to grapple with the whole, eating people thing. The story really gets rolling as the government ghoul investigators and antagonistic ghouls start to become more and more of a threat, and eventually, at the end of Act 1, Kaneki is kidnapped by a group of evil ghouls, which kicks off a chain of events that, well, let's just say, goes completely snooker-loopy by the end, doesn't even come close to describing how bonkers the story goes. And again, here there be spoilers. Okay? Pretty soon, we enter the second act, after the Anteiku group cross paths with Aogiri, a powerful and sinister ghoul organization with an eye for world domination. Kaneki is taken prisoner by an extremely powerful and sadistic ghoul who, proceeds to torture him into near insanity. Somehow, Kaneki ends up overpowering him and, eating said ghoul, revealing the third option hinted at earlier. Ghouls can survive via cannibalism, which, due to the way ghouls and Kagune work, which we're not going into here, it's pure wibbly-woo, but it's alright, has the added benefit of making them ridiculously powerful. Most of Act 2 consists of Kaneki slowly shedding his good nature, and now wandering Tokyo with his own little ghoul posse, hunting and eating bad ghouls as his humanity gradually slips away to the horror of the peaceful Anteiku crew. He sort of roams around the edges of the story for a while, and we come to spend a lot more time with other characters. The folks at Anteiku, the bad guys, the ghoul investigators, and Amon. We'll get to him. And this is where the story starts to get a little fractured. Things all come to a head though as Kaneki eventually goes completely bonkers, does a really bad thing, and finally turns into a ravening feral ghoul that also happens to be obnoxiously strong due to the aforementioned cannibalism. And this all culminates in a climactic battle where the ghoul investigators and Anteiku clash, which leaves basically everyone, including Kaneki who arrives too late, dead. I told you there were spoilers, so that's Tokyo Ghoul. And, there's a lot I'm skipping. A lot. I mean, I haven't even touched on Juzo Suzuya here, who, Juzo's a vibe, or Kaneki's own little crew of ghouls, or fan favorites like Ayato, Arima, Uta, and Renji, or I guess I could talk about the really annoying characters like Nico, Shu, Naki, or Banjo, or the ghoul investigators like the bread sandwich boring Amon, or the frustrating Akira, or villains like Yamori, or Etor, or the Owls, or the Clowns, are you starting to maybe see the problem? Tokyo Ghoul has a lot of characters, and for some reason, we spend time with all of them. A lot of time. Frequently, way too much. And very few of them are that interesting, which leads to the unfortunate sense that the manga spends a lot of its time basically spinning its wheels, particularly Amon and Akira's stuff, which drags on for ages, goes absolutely nowhere, and mostly serves to remind us that the Ghoul investigators aren't all bad, which could have been done in a few panels rather than a few volumes. And, spoiler, is also literally what the second half of the manga is about. Okay, one or two of these side plots does go well. Seido, for example, damn it, that was sad. But these are the exception, and this sort of scattershot storytelling, slowly but surely, makes the manga kind of impenetrable. Nonetheless, if Tokyo Ghoul had ended there, with basically everyone dead in the aftermath of the Anteiku battle, it would have been a bit of a letdown with a massively depressing ending, but it still would probably have been really well regarded. However, that's not what ended up happening. Instead, we got the second part of Tokyo Ghoul. Tokyo Ghoul Re, or Rei, I guess. And we'll take a look at that after the break. So, Tokyo Ghoul, pretty much universally acclaimed. Tokyo Ghoul Rei, so universally hated that it almost brings down Tokyo Ghoul retroactively. Why? Well, turns out Kaneki might have survived, as we join a mysterious ghoul hunter by the name of Heise, who looks exactly like him. He's part of a special squad of ghoul hunters that have been artificially given ghoul abilities by the government. Any of this starting to sound familiar, all you fans of Chainsaw Man? And yes, it's very obviously Kaneki, but it takes an obnoxiously long time for the story to catch up with and explain what we already know. Tokyo Ghoul Rei can be described as Tokyo Ghoul, but more, and more does not always equal better. More characters, more fights, more faffing around, more pointless go-nowhere plotlines. And did I say more fights? Yeah. Rei absolutely and utterly abandons all of the philosophical explorations of identity and morality and moral relativism that made Tokyo Ghoul so interesting in places, and instead just turns into another shonen fight manga. And not an amazing one at that. The ghoul powers get, just really silly. By the end of this thing, they can basically do anything. They can shoot lightning and fire, or even be a rocket launcher. What is this, existence? But by far the worst thing, all of the awesome characterization falls by the wayside as we get more and more sodding over long and frequently completely pointless fights, as well as an endless cavalcade of stupid twists. Yeah, those of you who have read this thing know exactly what I'm talking about right now. Damn it, but that was just daft. Or hyped up mysteries, very few of which have satisfactory conclusions, and some of which actually managed to retroactively undermine hard-hitting plot elements from the first half of the manga. Now, I know a lot of people hate Rei with the burning passion of 1,000 suns, but I don't. I don't love it, but there are some interesting ideas scattered throughout, and the art, if anything, is even better than before. But yeah, overall, it's not very good. Ishida has the weakness that I think a lot of young creative folks have, in that he's in desperate need of an editor with a big pair of pruning shears, someone to trim the fat off the story, because Rei is, for way too much of its run, mostly fat. And that's not even mentioning the ending, which, yeah, is both howlingly insane, hand-eatingly stupid, and just unbelievably contrived. That all said, for all his faults, Ishida does do enough right that I still have an okay time reading it. Tokyo Ghoul is an imperfect series that starts really bloody well, peaks about a third of the way in, does go to some pretty interesting places from time to time, but just sort of peters out. You get the sense that, both from the narrative and Ishida's own statements, that he got pretty tired of the story before it was finished, and ended up feeling a little trapped. But yeah, if he'd just abandoned it, that might have ended up being even more annoying. Which is better? Which is worse? It's a hard question to answer. Regardless, at the end of the day, Tokyo Ghoul is absolutely worth your time, and I'm really curious as to what you all thought of Rei. Why don't you let me know in the comments? And who knows, if there's enough demand, and if this video doesn't get nuked, maybe we'll do a deep dive at a later date. Because, again, I've barely even scratched the surface here. Before we finish for the day, I want to give a huge thanks, as always, to my fantastic patrons: Astrixic Gaming, Piece of Yeast, Elspresso, Cheerful Satanist, Starwin Marwin, Hilo J, Jacob Ramsey, Crazy, James Bakes Bread, Wargle, Calcor, Lance Goebel, Paul Norberger, Rafferty, Erin Arnold, The Hedgehog Gamer, Simone, and XTC Pill. If you want to see more like this, why not stick around? Subscribe, bell, you know the drill. If you want to hear me say your name, get early access to most of my videos, have some fun perks on the Discord, and, buy food for Baby Owl, and ensure that I can keep on doing what I do, why not take a look at our Patreon? All links are in the description. Take care, my friends, and cheers. This is the Owl, signing off.